The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. But early in the morning, he arrived again in the temple area, and all the people started coming to him. And he sat down and taught them. Then the scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery and made her stand in the middle. They said to him, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the very act of committing adultery. Now, in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such a woman. So, what do you say?" They said this to test him, so that they could have some charge to bring against him. Jesus bent down and began to write on the ground with his finger. But when they continued asking him, he straightened up and said to them, "Let the one among you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." Again he bent down and wrote on the ground. And in response, they went away one by one, beginning with the elders. So he was left alone with the woman before him. Then Jesus straightened up and said to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She replied, "No one, sir." Then Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go, and from now on, do not sin anymore." The Gospel of the Lord.
Thanks be to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
I do have to say that the welcome presence of our seminarians from Juan Diego House pretty much ruined the opening of my homily. Because I was going to refer to the saying which we all heard, that only the good die young. And we also know that there is a corollary to that. Only the young die good. And then I was going to ask, something like, do you all kind of identify with this? Because nobody in here is young anymore. So you all project yourselves a few years from now. Because guess what? God willing, you're all going to get there. Okay? There'll be a lot of journeys in between. A lot of opportunities for doing good and avoiding evil, most of which, God willing, you will navigate through successfully. But I think it's the experience of your elders who are here, including our brother priests, that we don't always navigate through those choices of good and evil very successfully. And so we reach this time of life acutely conscious and aware that as we look back on our lives, there's a lot that we simply have to say, Lord, have mercy. Because we can't justify ourselves. We are a lot like that woman taken in adultery, standing there before Jesus. Silent. She didn't even plead for mercy. There's no indication here that she fought against her condemnation. She simply stood there in silence, with whatever the thoughts of her heart might be. They are not known to us. All we know is she was guilty as charged. There was no defense for her. And quite frankly, I think most of us stand in something of that same relationship with God if we are honest about it. Many of us do tend to slip a little bit in that honesty and sort of say, well, I'm not so bad, or I've done this penance or that penance, or I've confessed my sins and I've made up for them. Well, of course we can't make up for offenses against God. Nor actually can we make up for offenses against ourselves or against one another any more than we can make the hole disappear after we have pulled the nail out. So, all of us, young or old, can simply stand before the Lord and say, Lord, have mercy on me, a sinner. And it is that precisely, and only that then opens ourselves to the work of God, the healing and forgiving, reconciling work of God within us. We don't have to do anything except to let God be God. What that means, of course, is that heaven is a come-as-you-are party. Anything that is needed to enter into heaven, God has already supplied. All we have to do is receive it. And receiving it means responding to it. Responding to the experience of God's mercy in our lives by showing mercy in turn. How do we show mercy here? Well, there may be certain similarities. I hesitate to say this, but there may be certain similarities between the community here and the community of Juan Diego House. One of which might be that in any form of community, there are two particular temptations that are divisive. And I'd sort of like to characterize them by two words: gossip and grumpiness. And I think by addressing those two temptations in ourselves, we can learn to tolerate and have mercy on our experience of others who are not so successful at resisting those temptations. We tend to be very critical in looking at others who gossip or who are grumpy. We tend often not to realize that what makes us sensitive to the faults of others is our own running away from the same fault in ourselves. And so if we can perhaps embrace our own sinfulness, our own failure to effectively deal with those two temptations, gossip and grumpiness, perhaps the way that we can show mercy to others is by readiness to understand and forgive when we experience others doing pretty much the same thing that we know that we do ourselves. So whether you are in a youthful community or a community like Nazareth House, I think the mercy that is asked of us, the way of identifying with the mercy of Jesus, is to look at others with the same mercy that we would like to experience for ourselves.